Okay, we have two public hearings, and the format on these agendas has been revised a bit, so it calls for a call to order. Would the clerk please call the roll? I'll have the public hearing first on the Highland Green real estate sale. I wonder if the clerk would please call the roll.
Here. Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here. I have, is there anyone who would like to testify on this particular topic of the sale of Highland Green real estate? We have public participation at this point. No one's filed a little card, but if you want to talk about it, now's your chance. Guess no one wants to testify. It is it's an ordinance authorizing the sale of 401 and 403 East Kerr Avenue. Libby.
Just, well, of course, you're all familiar with the project. The ordinance will actually be coming hopefully next week to committee for the real estate transfer along with the grant agreements. We've been working with the attorneys on the format of those, and so hopefully you'll see those in the committee packet. And I was informed this morning by Kelly Murkowski that we've met our timeliness deadline for expenditure of funds, thanks in part to this project. So that's another good milestone for us.
I know it's been in the works for a very long time. If no one wants to testify, or you had a question, go ahead.
I think last time when we saw the draft ordinance to sell it, it just said that for the purposes of creating 33 housing units or something. Will there be more specific information that we need to approve as far as, we've looked at plans before, but we never really, did we ever approve anything? Do we do that? Or is that something once we sell it to Home Consortium, it's all in their court?
There is a site plan, and that's something that we could certainly attach to the ordinance. For a while, it looked like they might need a planned unit development approval, but because it's such a low density and they're utilizing a private street, they actually did not need to get any zoning approvals, so it's by right, and also did not need to replat in any way. So, but it's a very similar layout to what you've seen: community gardens, low density development, connections to Crystal View townhomes. So it'll be very similar to the site plan that you've seen.
So then in the sale agreement, would there be something that said we expect it to be developed basically in conformance with the plans submitted?
Yeah, that's the idea, to sell the property for that project.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of agreement language, and of course any of the funding is tied to that project as well as the affordability and other requirements. So we'll check to make sure the site plan's attached to those documents.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments on this? If no one else wants to say anything, let's close this hearing then, adjourn it. The next hearing is on an ordinance amending the Urbana City Code to increase the number of Class G2 liquor licenses for Lacey's Place at 110 East University Avenue. And also we have one for increasing the Class G2 liquor licenses for Hot Spot Restaurant. And so Hot Spot, I think it was a change of ownership that took place, and they didn't realize they had to refile. So is there anyone who would like to testify on either one of these liquor ordinance changes? Any questions from the council? Okay, since no one wants to say anything, we'll adjourn that hearing. Okay, we are at the Urbana City Council meeting. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Still here.
Mr. Jacobson. Mr. Madigan.
Here.
Ms. Marlin.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Smythe.
Here.
Mayor Pressing.
Here. The first item is the approval of the minutes. We have July 11th, a special meeting, and July 18th.
So move. Second.
Motion by Ammons, seconded by Smythe. Any additions or corrections? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Are there any additions to the agenda? Okay, we come next to petitions and communications. I have, I think I have 3 things here. No, maybe just 2. Peter Folk, you want to talk at the special council meeting, right? A special committee meeting? Because you want to talk about,
No, he wants,
ITB.
no, he wants this.
so that's not on this
That's
agenda.
on the, that's city council, yes.
It is on the city council. Okay, I couldn't really tell from your card here. Okay, the first person I have is John Nickel.
That would be me.
Okay,
So I am here to talk about, as you can see on my card, Springfield Avenue crosswalks or the lack thereof. So I'm in a Boy Scout troop, Troop 6 in Urbana. And for part of my citizenship in the community merit badge, I was told one of the requirements is to find an issue and essentially attempt to address it. So I often walk around town crossing Springfield Avenue, and I notice a large stretch in it where the cars tend to be really fast and where there are really nasty bends in the road. And so it's near impossible to get across safely. So I talked to Mr. Jacobson about it. I emailed him, and he invited me to, well, he said, would you like to, at some point, walk down Springfield Avenue together to see what these are? So I agreed to do that, and let's see. As you can see from the chart over there, the map, I've got various sections labeled in with numbers, and so this place right here is what I think should be top priority for doing these crosswalks, because it's flanked by 2 different bus stops. In the space that we were there, then 2 different students just walked across the road without the crosswalks. You can see that there are this bend in the road right here. It's right next to the Phillips Rec Center, which is teeming with children. It's just, in general, a tragedy waiting to happen. Number 2. Yes. So here's another place that I think should have a crosswalk, especially since there's the Canaan Baptist School right up here somewhere, who also walk across town. And although a crosswalk has already been put in place, it's not the one that they really need. In general, there isn't really any traffic deterrence on Springfield in this section, so cars tend to speed up. And 3 and 4, so we couldn't decide which one or both to do. It's in Kohler and Busey, I believe. This is a route that I often take, and it's also right next to a bus stop, as well as all three of these are. So, yeah, this one could be either one of those two, or it could be both of those streets that we put crosswalks up, but certainly in the middle of Springfield, right next to the parking lot and the Phillips Rec Center, and over here on, I believe, McCullough, there should be crosswalks there.
Okay, we have a traffic commission. I'll talk to the Director of Public Works about your suggestions. Does anybody have a question you want to ask? Charlie?
I'm just thinking that, yeah, it's appropriate to send this to the Traffic Commission, and in the Traffic Commission, the data would be to ask for the history of any accidents along there, both with pedestrians and bicyclists. I regularly cross Kohler across Springfield on a bicycle, so I'm real. You've got to be extremely careful at that intersection. The other thing to ask would be the MTD if they're going to go to fixed bus stops on Springfield Avenue like they're doing in a number of other places. So that would be information to get before the Traffic Commission meeting. So.
Did you want to go to another meeting?
I don't
Sometimes you have to go to a
I'm
lot
not
of meetings to
prepared
get
for it
something done.
as of yet.
Well, anyway, thank you for coming. Okay, here's another question. Dennis Roberts has a question.
Well, I just wanted to say that the Traffic Commission meets on the first Tuesday of each month, so it could be very timely. Second. Oh, that. We moved it. All right, they moved it. So it's timely because you'd have about a week to make that visit, and it's very easy, very simple group of people to talk to, and they would address this because this is something that has to do with traffic safety and pedestrians, and Michael's on the traffic committee.
So
Okay,
yeah,
Mike.
we've actually canceled the meeting. The notice of cancellation is in process for lack of business. So that'll give you a month to prepare.
All right.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much. Durrell Cruz.
Good evening. My name is Durrell Cruz. Another year has passed, and IDOT recently released its 14th traffic stop study for the year 2015. Little has changed. As you can see from the graph that I passed out, the last 4 years, African American drivers in Urbana have been involved in 50 to 60% of dog sniffs, 40-50% of the consent searches, and 30% of the traffic stops, while making up 16% of the driving public. In 12 years, that's 7,200 more stops of African American drivers than one would statistically expect, more than the entire African American population of Urbana. Since 2010, the city and Urbana Police Department have taken a number of steps in an attempt to understand and reduce these traffic stop racial disparities. You formed a task force to study the issue, make recommendations. You continued diversity training, conducted more community police outreach programs and educational efforts, lowered marijuana fines, expanded local data collection, and made plans to hire a statistician. Yet the racial disparities persist unchanged. Why is that? Although you are to be commended for your concern and actions, we must not confuse effort with results. If the intent of these activities was to reduce traffic stop racial disparities, we as a community have failed miserably. We have simply given appearance of doing a lot when in fact we have accomplished very little. It is clear We have utterly failed to address the core source of traffic stop racial disparities. We both know that when traffic stops are conducted solely for safety reasons, racial disparities are statistically insignificant. We now also know that when traffic stops are conducted for investigatory purposes, racial disparities increase. This fact is clear and obvious. Yet knowing this, the city and community have hesitated to ask and failed to determine whether investigatory traffic stops actually are an effective crime-fighting tactic, making our communities safer, or rather a blanket approach to fighting crime that has produced many unintended consequences that over time have actually negatively impacted our community and harmed police community trust. Since the inception of the war on drugs, investigatory traffic stops have had profoundly negative effects in minority communities, with little experienced by the broader white community. This fact is not an attack on the Urbana Police Department or its professionalism. I have great respect for the difficulty and dangers of police work. Rather, it is simply raising a fundamental question. Are investigatory stops adopted by thousands of police departments of countries decades ago still an appropriate tool for today's policing? Or does it actually do more harm by straining the community trust so vitally needed for effective policing? Investigatory traffic stops must be viewed by all segments of the public as fair, equitable, and executed lawfully, meeting the standards of reasonable suspicion or probable cause, regardless of race. Casting a broad net is not good or effective policing. In light of recent police community turmoil around the country, Dallas, Baton Rouge, St. Paul, the urgency and importance of answering this question locally is obvious. It is well past time that the public should be able to see raw, local traffic stop data by type of stop, reason for
You
stop,
have 1 minute, Mr. Cruz.
arrests made during the stop, crimes addressed by the stop, all disaggregated by race and age. The Urbana Police Department started tracking aspects of this data in February of 2015. That's 18 months ago. When will this data become available to the public? Today's intense and emotional discussion of race and policing demand a more urgent and timely response by the Council. Providing this information to inform and enlighten our community should be one of your top 5 priorities during the next 3 to 6 months. Thank you.
Aaron?
Yeah, so Daryl, thank you for continue to raise this issue and to stay vigilant about the issue. Certainly something that's I think is important to the council. Well, let me not say that because I don't know if it's important to the council, to tell you the truth. We were supposed to be talking about this on a regular basis. Back July was the last time it was on the actual agenda, and here we are at 8/1, and it still hasn't been on the agenda to actually discuss it again. So even with the Traffic Commission and everything put together, we have not done what we said we would do. Just 2 weeks ago or so, I asked the mayor to put it on the agenda, and we still don't have it on the agenda. So maybe it's coming up this month to talk about. So I appreciate you raising the issue and continue to raise the issue. And I'd like for you to expound a little bit on investigatory stops. What are investigatory stops, and why do you think that they are clearly, maybe it's a tool that we should not use in Urbana anymore?
Well, I'll say this, but I'll ask Chief Connolly to correct me if I'm wrong, okay, and try to be fair and accurate about it. An investigatory stop is when the police department uses traffic stops as a pretext to conduct a stop, to conduct a further investigation regarding some concern or issue that becomes apparent to the police officer. So the traffic stop is not done primarily for safety reasons regarding speeding or improper turn. It's done for the purpose of investigating or questioning the driver occupants of a car in addition to the stop that's being done. It's been used for decades. It's legal if it's done appropriately, and it's thought of as an effective way to reduce crime and make the community safer. The question is that do we know for a fact that that is in fact the results that are occurring from using this particular tactic or strategy by the police department? We have no concrete data. What type of reduction of crime has occurred? What percent of investigatory stops result in reducing crime or arrests? The racial disparities that occur because of the investigatory stop seem to be racially biased. What effect does this have on that particular community over decades of time in terms of their relationship to the police department and its effect in community policing? These are all issues that are being discussed nationally, and it's an issue that exists locally, and it's a time that I think it needs to come more to the forefront in terms of addressing this issue, and I just encourage the City Council to be more proactive in addressing this issue. It's been 14 years. It's 18 months ago since the UPD started collecting it. We're in August of 2016, and nothing that has been done yet has changed the racial disparities that exist in Urbana's traffic stops. It's been consistent for 14 years.
So 7,200 more stops for African Americans than expected based upon the ratio.
There was a little over 14,000 African American stops during the 12 years. They're stopped at a rate twice of what you would expect, so that's roughly half. If there was no racial disparities, that is simply coming up with that figure of wouldn't be. If that disparity was gone and it was equal between races, that would not be there, and there would be half as many stops as have occurred, or over 7,000. 7,000 during the last 14 years.
And we don't have any sort of data that shows of those stops, what sort of crimes were
What the
prevented,
reason
how it
were,
made the community
whether
safer.
effective or the crime. We have no raw data. That's all we need is raw data. And the purpose of the state IDOT traffic stop study was to provide an overview so local communities could drill down and look at their local data and determine what's happening in their local communities. I know in 2010 there was an effort made, but that's 6 years ago again. And you look at the IDOT report that came out last week, which I just did, it's exactly almost the same as every previous state report. We have not addressed the fundamental problem of racial disparities in traffic stops. Or if there is a reason for it, we know it is effective and working, and we can explain that to the community, which would be helpful. But we can't do that. We know what the negative impact is because the report you got highlighted the negative impacts that racial disparities have in traffic stops. This is a crucial issue to our community in the country, especially in light of the last couple of weeks. And I would encourage you to be a little more urgent in just getting this data so we know exactly what's going on. Are
Are there any other places that you know of that have done something different than the investigatory stops and what that has produced for them?
No, I really don't. Other than just looking at literature that we've read about where different communities like Kansas City did a study and looked at the impact of that. Pulled Over the book has several references to places that have made adjustments. And the irony is, this could be done simply by the police department if they wanted to make some changes right now in terms of just making sure stops are done only under reasonable if they believe a crime is occurring at the time, rather than casting a broad net. So I don't know. Things can be done if the community wants to make the effort to do it.
Okay, thank you, Daryl.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Reverend Dr.
Another question.
Beg your pardon? Oh, Diane?
Just had a question. We did spend a lot of time talking about collection of this extra data. Do we know when we're going to be able to see?
I don't
Some
know. I've been
results of
gone
it.
for 2 weeks. I think we were going to hire a statistician. Do we have a statistician yet? No, we do not. Okay. We're looking for a statistician. I think we have done a lot so far, but we'll see what we can do further.
Well, I just want to make sure we say then for the record, because it's that sort of disposition that I think is exactly what Daryl is talking about. There's no sense of urgency at all to address that particular point then, you know. That's not a, I certainly don't feel like that's what's happening. Is there I thought we asked Chief to set a date or a deadline or something like that for a statistician so that we could actually do this type of work. Was there?
I think it's in the budget, but you still have to go through the process of hiring someone. So that takes time. We'll find out what we can do.
So
We'll
that still
report
doesn't
back
set a
about
date,
where
though.
where we are on the search process, okay? Next week. I can't tell you right now because I just got back, so I will look into it and let you know, report to the council. And I also did ask Alex to give us an update too. So we'll do that this month, as you said. We are now in August, and we'll do that.
So I'm not asking for an update from Alex. I'm asking for the council, because what I thought very clearly was communicated was that this council would discuss recommendations that were made by the task force at least once a month.
That's Alex that I've talked to about that, so we will get you a report this month, okay?
I'm not asking for a report. I'm
A
asking,
discussion, a report that we can discuss. Is that what you're looking for?
so to be as clear as I possibly can.
Well, I
there were
think that's what
recommend-
we agreed to, and
Okay, I don't
that's what
think
we'll
I'm
do.
supposed to interrupt you, and I don't think you're supposed to interrupt me. I'm asking for us to discuss the recommendations that were ordered and prioritized by the task force. We should at least be discussing those prioritized recommendations once a month. We haven't even done that, let alone hire a statistician or to address any of those particular concerns. And that does not send a signal to me or the community that there's any sense of urgency around this topic. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. Reverend Dr. Evelyn and Bishop King James Underwood would like to register their concern about the Dr. Ellis subdivision, but they do not wish to testify. And Peter Folk would like to testify.
Didn't know I was testifying.
Well, comment. You want to comment?
I guess I'm not
Okay.
sure what I'm doing. This council, at your last meeting, did me the honor of considering the interests of my company, and I hope the interests of our constituent customers in Urbana, which are growing by leaps and bounds this month and this year. And it's in relation to the topic of the ITV3 transition that I wanted to address some of the questions and talk about where the existing memorandum of understanding leaves the community and providers like us and the customers that use our networks. So the primary question that was asked was how does this impact? Does it negatively impact the ability of smaller competitors to continue to operate in Urbana and to provide great services to Urbana residents? And I believe it was Mr. Brown asked whether it impacted people who might have in their business plan the use of that network, and I'll say affirmatively that it definitely does. The proposed memorandum of understanding pushes the timeline out possibly to infinity the ability of others to access the supposedly community backbone. What I'm referring to is the dark fiber leases and IRUs, which are which in the original contract with ITV3 as a non-public clause, which was never discussed in public before it was ratified by the councils. They gave ITV3 an exclusive 5-year right to use all of the strands of the fiber optic backbone, and then after that time they were required to relinquish the ones that they did not use and allow others to use it. The new memorandum of understanding says, okay, well, we're, you know, the original horse we bet on had a false start, so we're going to let him start over again, give him the full racetrack to run, unlike the rest of the competitive world, where if you false start, you either get disqualified or everybody else runs out in front of you. The new memorandum of understanding says that those IRUs and dark fiber leases, which is the fundamental aspect of this network that is useful to a competitor to ITV3 or Comcast for that matter, those are now on a new 5-year timetable, and after that 5 years, the ITV3 is, or the new entity, whatever it's called, will be evaluated based on whether they met their build-out criterion, the build-out metrics that are in the memorandum of understanding, and if they did meet that, then they are not required to allow anyone ever to access those strands, whether they're using those strands or not. It is a closed network at that point. I mean, I've been involved with UCDB from the very beginning. I'm a strong supporter of the existence of a public open access network. It serves many purposes for our community in that it, you know, reduces the need for right-of-way construction. It reduces the cost of entry. It allows innovators to come in without a huge ton of money. This very likely eliminates that benefit, which was the primary outstanding feature of this network from the beginning.
You have
It's a
1
shame.
minute, Mr. Falk.
Thank you. It's a shame. I don't really see anything that you guys will be able to do about it other than register it as an important priority for the city. You've talked about trying to avoid right-of-way congestion, and this is one of the ways that you could do it, but with the MOU basically prevents that from being an effective tool. Thank you. I'm happy to answer questions if there are any.
Any questions for Peter? Yes, Dennis.
So, Peter, your concern is that, in a sense, the agreement is structured in a way that makes smaller independent potential users of the fiber channels, fiber pathways, unable to really access them because of what you're describing as a prioritized use clause that allows them a 5-year monopoly on the fiber before it's become shared. Am I getting that right?
That's the essence of it, but it's a little bit more insidious than that, in that it doesn't even require, after that 5 years is up, that the unused strands are made available to other providers. It extends the current moratorium on competitive access by another, I guess, 2 or 3 years. I don't remember when the exact deadline was before. But it also changes the rules on how those strands would be made available and whether they would be made available, and is structured in such a way that they may never be made available. If ITV3 is baseline successful in building out, if they are able to develop the capital to build out according to the plan, no competitors will ever have access to those strands.
And that would leave then the competitors only access would be to lay their own strands in the public thoroughfare right of way.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
At substantially increased expense and inconvenience and time, it reduces people's ability to deploy new innovative products as well.
So you're thinking that it would be a doubling of existing strand fiber in the same place because you have 5 strands, perhaps, or 2 strands or 3 strands instead of a single dedicated strand that's shared?
I would suggest it's more than doubling. In several cases, I think there will likely be 5 or 6 different providers that all are running their own infrastructure.
Well, I hope that a little bit of clarity comes as we come to the topic of discussion tonight.
So did you say that the first agreement was for 5 years, and then they've extended it and added another 5 years?
No, they've extended it to restart the clock as 5 years from today. So it's not.
How long was the first one? 3
The
years?
first one was 5 years, of which
No,
some
but I
of
mean,
them-
how much did they actually use? 3 years?
Mr. Smythe might know better.
2.5?
2.5.
So that second 2.5 has now been replaced by 5.
Right.
So they've really extended it for 2.5 years
Correct.
total.
Yes.
Okay. Diane, and then Bill.
Well, I'm looking at page 7 of the MOU, paragraph 17. It said, beginning no later than December 31st, 2022, grantee will make available for lease or IRU the percentage of unused ring fiber in the network equal to the percentage of the 22,000 households passed which have not been passed. It would then offer the fiber for lease or IRU at no more than the Illinois Century Network's existing pricing. Doesn't that mean that if those homes aren't passed, there will be some dark fiber made available?
Correct. It means that if they fail to meet the requirements of their new agreement, then they will be required to give access. But if they meet those requirements, whether or not they're using those strands, they are not required to give access.
Bill Brown?
So, I don't know anything about capacity of these networks, but 22,000 household pass relative to how much dark fiber is in the ground, what percentage of the dark fiber that's out there now would it take to cover the 22,000 households?
I believe the number at one point was about half. So I think Mr. Smeltzer actually did a plan for that, and I think it was about 100 strands out of the 216.
And then this MOU they signed up would also provide for 90 days immediately to give the cities a right to buy or designate a buyer, basically do a RFP or something to find a buyer. Do you think that's appropriate remedy to try to get some competition, and maybe as part of the RFP insist that there would be an open network and see if anybody out there is willing to do it for that?
Well, it's certainly better than nothing. I mean, $8.2 million is a lot of money, but it's not outside of the possibility of at least two at least two non-incumbent local providers. So 2 private operators within Champaign-Urbana could afford that without too much. Actually, 3, now that I'm thinking about it. 3 local non-incumbent, so that's not AT&T, not Comcast. 3 additional ones could afford that, and if they were willing to stipulate to those clauses, it would be an improvement in the cities. And I'll also mention that if they did that, there would be nothing to preclude ITV3 from continuing their plan in the communities. It's supposed to be a competition, right? It's supposed to be open to multiple competitors. And so they could have access to the strands they need. It's just the strands they don't need that should be available to the community in a public access network.
Thank you.
Are you going to talk to the Champaign City Council?
I will, but I don't think it's on their agenda for tomorrow. I didn't see it
Okay.
there, at least.
Well, you can talk about it, even if it's not on their agenda.
True.
Although you might have to wait till the end of the meeting. Any other questions for Peter? Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the Urbana City Council? Okay. We have unfinished business listed, but I don't think we're going to deal with any of that tonight. So reports of standing committees, the Committee of the Whole. Who was the last person to do the Committee of the Whole?
Aaron?
Aaron?
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so ordinance number 2016-07058-058, I should say, an ordinance waiving right of first refusal to purchase assets, waiver of the City of Urbana's right to purchase those UC2B fiber optic network assets located within the City of Urbana's corporate boundaries and which are operated by ITV3 Incorporated. Legal.
Do you want to comment on that, Kurt?
I don't have anything in addition to what Mr. Simon sent to the City Council this week.
Okay. Are there any questions? Charlie?
I think it'd probably be appropriate to get Paul Hickson and Mike Smeltzer up to explain and answer, maybe address the issue that Diane raised a moment ago about the interpretation of paragraph 17 and the and also the right of the 90-day window.
Okay, are there any questions?
Yes.
We have two great experts here.
Yeah, Mike, could you explain the logic of paragraph 17 and how it works with respect to the previous version of same in the agreement with ITV3?
The previous agreement with ITV3 was poorly worded in regards to Section 17. What it said was that at the end of 5 years, if there were strands that were dedicated, let's say, to your neighborhood, and they weren't used, that they had to make those available for lease or for IRU. The design of the network is such as there's really no strands designated to any neighborhood. They're rings. And one ring might go through every one of your neighborhoods, and it's kind of a design decision. If your neighborhood signs up for service, which strands get used for it. It could be strand 100, it could be strand 200. And in many cases, there's multiple rings that serve neighborhoods. A lot of times there's two rings in the same cable. So you'll have large sections in Urbana where rings 5 and 6 are in the same cable. And if there's a neighborhood that's adjacent to that that needs service, you could use strands from ring 5, you could use strands from ring 6. So the whole premise of the language in the original ITV3 agreement was very confusing. It would be very hard to enforce. And so what we attempted to do, but not totally perfectly, was to put a number to it and to say, all right, you're getting 1,200 strands, and if you do 50% of the homes, and we want you to do 22,000 single-family homes, so if you do 11,000 homes, and that's all you do in the 5 years, then you have to make 50% of those strands, 600 of those strands, available for lease or IRU by other people. The previous speaker missed an important point in all of this, and that is that there's other ways that local providers can provide services over the existing network, and it happens today. ITV3 provides what is called Layer 2 services to customers. The company I work for, Champaign Telephone, has, I don't know, 60 or 70 different locations in Champaign-Urbana where they just lease the connectivity from ITV3 at a very reasonable rate. And they can provide services over to that. I'm trying to think of a good example. There may be a church or a school that buys their internet access from ITV3, but that same equipment can also carry telephone service, and so Champaign Telephone, for instance, might lease a telephone circuit over that same fiber into there. So the church would get their telephone service from Champaign Telephone, they might get their internet from ITV3. And there's other ways that happens. I think we do one of those actually with Bolo. We do some of that with Pavlov. It's a common, actually, there are places where we have customers and ITV3 leases a Layer 2 circuit from us. So having your own fiber is certainly desirable, and there's some reasons that have to do with accounting and whatnot that you might want to have that. But in terms of this being an open network, it's an open network today, and it will always be an open network.
Yep, Paul, I think the issue is the Layer 1 access.
Right.
And so
layer
let
one
me,
is...
let me ask the follow-up question, which here is, okay, yeah, so suppose they succeed and do the full build-out of passing what we think is the theoretical number of residences in the community, then, but if the system was overbuilt, then they're being rewarded with unused fiber, the way this is written. Or if they do pass 22,000 homes and all 22,000 homes were to hook up, would that use up all of the fiber? What's the capacity of the fiber, I guess?
It depends what you're measuring. For the agreement with ITV, or for the agreement with Countrywide, let's call them Countrywide just to keep them separate, we zeroed in on single-family homes just because those are kind of easy to measure, and single-family homes have a higher propensity for people to make their own decision about whether they want service or not. If you live in a 20-unit apartment building, your landlord's going to have a lot to say in terms of whether you're going to allow a company like ITV3 or Volo or anybody else to come in and put infrastructure within your building. So it becomes more of a landlord's decision there. And it would be very hard for us to hold a provider's feet to the fire for not doing something when it may not be their fault. It may be a stubborn landlord, or a landlord that already has a deal with Comcast, or a landlord that already has a deal with AT&T and doesn't want those services in there. So we singled in on single-family homes. Just real quickly, the equipment that provides this kind of service is something called GPON, and where you can have one strand of fiber that serves 32 homes out in the field. So every one strand of fiber on our rings could conceivably serve 32 homes. So to get to those 22,000 homes, it's going to take roughly 687 strands of fiber if everything was laid out perfectly and we always got exactly 32 homes on a sector. It won't ever be that perfect. You might average more in the 20s range. So it could take 800 or 900 of the strands that are available just to do all the single-family homes. We have a lot of duplexes. We have a lot of small apartment buildings. We have a lot of businesses. Most of the strands that are available to ITV3 today, if they truly build out the community where we want them to build it, they're going to use them all up. And if they get to 100%, then there's still the opportunity for a small company, such as the one I work for or the one Peter works for, to buy services from ITV3. If they've got everybody connected to this community network and they're making those places available to sell services, you could start a gaming network, or you could start a storage network, or you could start whatever kind of internet business you wanted, and you could have access to those people through either a layer 2 connection or just through a regular internet connection. So it is an open network. It's just not open at layer 1, but layer 1 is a tricky place to be open at.
I'd like to add two things to what Mike said. One is that I think that there may have been an assumption on some people's part that this was greatly overbuilt. It was not. There is not a designed excess capacity here. And given the various factors that Mike was just describing and the unpredictability of it, it's very possible that what was obtained and then built in the basic infrastructure for UC2B will be totally used if this plan proceeds as we hope. And the second thing I'd like to say is, it was always the understanding that since there was not an apparent amount of capital and desire in the Twin Cities to municipally do this, that it was going to be important after the basic backbone was built to find a private partner to build it out. So we do want that private partner to succeed. The absolutely best outcome would be not only if all 22,000 dwelling units are passed, but then a high percentage of those folks see that as a desirable service at a good price and connect. And if that all happens, there isn't going to be a great amount. There will be some, but there won't be a great amount, I don't believe, of excess capacity. So the point of all this was to get our community wired, and that still is the point.
Bill?
So for the level 2 access, are there other carriers that you can do the same thing through now besides UC2B? Is there any competition in that market?
Neither Comcast nor AT&T offer that kind of connectivity, at least in this community, but Volo and Pavlov and Champaign Telephone and ITV3 all provide those kinds of services to each other. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it's mostly ITV3 providing those to other people, but I think, Peter, you still here? I think there's some place where we're doing some layer 2 things back and forth, is that right? No. Okay. I thought we were doing that. Not out at the airport, not out at the utility or the implement dealer out north of town? Aren't we doing layer 2 over that? Okay.
Okay.
Well, at any rate, it's certainly possible, it's technically possible to achieve, and most of the services that are provided over layer 2 at this point are ITV3 to other providers.
Okay. And then as far as the concentration on single-family homes, I think in Urbana, 40% of our residents live in single-family homes. I know you don't want them to go out and cherry-pick big apartment buildings and be able to pass a lot of homes that way, but so you give them up to 10% of their homes can be apartments, multi-unit buildings. Is that how that works?
In terms of those yearly numbers and in terms of the 22,000 goal, over the 5 years, no more than 10% can be made up of units coming from MDU, either multiple dwelling units or big apartment complex, anything bigger than 8 units. Now, that's not very big in some cases. I know there's a lot of 12-unit buildings in town, but anything bigger than that, they can only have 2,200 units that count against that 22,000. If we had an accurate count today, there's probably a little over 21,000 single-family homes in Champaign and Urbana. But that changes all the time. We're looking forward to what's it going to be like in 2022. Who knows? So we're allowing, just because in getting people and getting a provider to pass most of the single-family homes, they're going to pick up a lot of the small apartment buildings. They're going to pick up a lot of small business areas in the process. And I can't say this absolutely, but I think most of the large apartment complexes have already got an internet solution. If you're a landlord today and you're not offering a decent internet, at least to the college student market, you don't have any tenants. So that's not a big, booming potential market. I know Peter's company does some of that. Pavlov Media, that's their whole business model. That's what they do, is apartment buildings. So that's not as big as a need, we thought, as it was in the single-family home area and in the duplexes and the smaller apartment complexes.
Okay, thank you.
Dennis?
In terms of laying fiber itself, as these expansions progress, do the smaller businesses have the opportunity to subcontract to actually make the fiber in the ground, lay the fiber in the ground, if this agreement goes forward with the new consortium? Is there a way that the smaller providers can lay cable as a subcontractor?
Well, sure. Countrywide would be totally free to hire whatever contractors it wants to. I mean, they don't have any contractors themselves. They're going to use subcontractors of some sort to do the construction work. There's perhaps a fine line between providers of services and people that do underground boring.
Right.
There are some companies that do both, but that's fairly rare. Maybe not quite so rare, but yes, if any of the local companies that do underground boring today were to go to Countrywide and say, hey, we want to be your underground construction company, well, that's up to them. That's a private business decision between those. We wouldn't be involved in that. You wouldn't be involved in that. That's just businesses working out their best possible options.
All right, so there's no restrictions that would limit that possibility?
Oh, no, not at all.
Bill?
Sorry, just one follow-up on the layer 2 access competition kind of idea. Is that something that would they have to publish a rate, or is that something they can they deal kind of independently with different people that want that access and make deals.
In the early days of UC2B, we kind of established a wholesale layer 2 rate, and thus far, and it may be contractually they have to, I haven't read every word of the ITV contract recently, ITV3 has continued to provide those services at the same rate they were 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It's not very much, it's very cheap. It's actually probably below what market rates might otherwise suggest it should be. So it's very affordable to use them to do that.
Is that something that MOU could require as a published rate that would be applied equally across the board?
It could. One of the best features of the MOU that's before you is the 90-day, now 88-day option to go and shop this and find perhaps an alternative provider to Countrywide. We are busily drafting language for an RFP that will go out and encourage participation in that. And one of the things that actually is in the draft at this point of that when it comes to wholesale rates is to try and set a percentage that wholesale rates cannot exceed given your retail rate. So if you charged $50 a month to have a 100 meg connection and I wanted to buy a layer 2 100 meg connection, you couldn't charge me $80 or $90 or more than the retail rate or even close to the retail rate. If you were to go to AT&T in some major markets and do that, it actually costs more to buy a wholesale connection than it does a retail connection, which is kind of, it infringes on business. Let's leave it at that. So we're going to attempt to put a percentage in there, and we'll let respondents say, all right, we promise we'll never have our wholesale rate more than 60%. Somebody else may say, well, we'll never have it more than 50%. Well, those that say 50% will be graded higher in the evaluation process than those that said 60%. And there'll be several things like that where the people responding to the RFP will have a chance to differentiate themselves in terms of what they're willing to do and not willing to do.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Aaron Ammons.
So I just wanted to make sure I was clear about a couple of things. On page 2, it talks about underneath the chart, the build out, an aggregate build out. Bullet point number 2 talks about for years 2017 to 2019, CWB will build out any sector where 45% of the dwelling and business units confirm an interest in subscribing to the service. What qualifies as confirms an interest in subscribing? What does that mean?
I don't know exactly what process they intend to use. What's kind of become a practice in the industry is kind of what ITV3 did, to do something to confirm that you're really a legitimate person when you go on their website and say, I want to sign up for service at 209 West Indiana. And often that's done by just having a credit card and saying, this is my credit card. They don't charge it, but they can at least run the credit card and see that, yes, you live at 209 West Indiana, and therefore if you say you want the service, you're a real person and you want the service and you live there, so we'll count you as a yes. There have been situations where industrious teenagers have signed up an entire neighborhood, and when the installers came to install the fiber, the residents go, what are you talking about? I never signed up for this. And so there needs to be some way of validating who's on your website doing that. There may be a better way than credit cards, but I don't think they're asking for any they won't be asking for any financial deposit or anything like that. They're just saying, if you build it, we want your service. No commitment that you're actually going to buy the service, although we kind of like people to be honest about it. But that's it. And that's similar to what ITV3 did. They just said, all right, if you'll sign up for the service and we get, ITV3 was at 50%, they've come down to 45 for the first 3 years, and I think it's 40% for the next couple of years. That will go ahead and build there. Now, even if they don't get to 45% in any neighborhood, we still expect them to build 3,250 homes next year, regardless of whether they get to those percentages. Think of those thresholds as kind of being their way of figuring out where to best spend their money. And they have to build if they get more than 45 under the contract, but they also have to build 3,250 homes or past that many homes. So think of it as helping them spend their money most wisely, but it doesn't say, oh, well, we didn't get to 45, we don't have to build anything. No, that's not what this says. This says you got to build 22,000 homes in 5 years, 5.5 years, depending on how you count. And that's an important, distinction.
Well, Just sort of skipping around, I had an order of questions, but you just raised one of them. The goal says that, you know, by 2021, the aggregate build-out should be at 18,000, and then by 2022, we should reach that 22,000 point. But the details of the agreement say more like, you know, as long as they reach, instead of 18,000 or 22,000, let's just go with 18,000 in 2021, because that's what I figured up here. The bar for penalties or any paybacks or anything like that is 6,600. So that's like 11,400 shy of the target. So, you know, it doesn't appear to me that from the language that they have any real incentive, or maybe you can explain to me what incentive do they have beyond the 6,600 in 6 years, because that's the sort of threshold of the bar for any sort of penalties.
And that is one of my least favorite parts of this agreement, but that's the best percentage we could negotiate with CWB. One of the things we hope to get out of talking to other providers is that 30% percentage at a much higher level. And even at that 30, if they don't build the 6,600 homes, we get to buy the network from them. That's their penalty, is we buy the network and they go away. But getting the 6,600 homes in 6 years, they will have gone out of business long before that, because right now the network is not self-sustaining. It has to grow. Our friends at ITV3 found a way to make some money by basically owning the network and flipping it, and we've talked about that. These guys have second mortgages on their houses. They've borrowed money from people that you don't not pay back. And the only way they can pay that money back is if they grow this network, have more customers, and make money. Paul, you're dying to talk.
Oh, I was just going to make the point that you got to. The incentive is them being successful with their lenders and basically getting to the point where their company makes money. They do not want to fail. The penalties are worst case penalties.
I mean, okay, so that makes sense to me that, you know, they have some incentive, they don't want to lose money. Right. Okay, so I don't know the ins and outs of this. It's just, that was something that was sort of jumped out to me, that I thought that there should be a much higher bar or threshold for them to have to reach in a 6-year period of time. What was the average that UC2B did each year and for as a build out?
UC2B was kind of a forced march. In order to not create traffic congestion and just total craziness in the streets, somewhere in the 4,000 homes passed a summer might be a reasonable level of construction. They could probably do it a little faster than that, but again, how many of your streets do you want closed at a time? It gets to be, and just managing that much, you know, they're not a super big company, just managing that many construction crews simultaneously gets to be a little bit problematic once you get past maybe half a dozen or so.
And so you guys understand this far better than I do, so I'm trying to make sure I'm asking questions that are actually congruent or germane to one another.
Sure.
So if UC2B was doing 4,000 a year, is that what you're saying in a build out?
It probably did about that, yeah.
And they're going, the threshold for them is to do 6,000 in 6 years? That's the
That's the minimum threshold, yes. I mean, that's certainly not the goal.
Okay, so the other question I had when I looked at this, I looked at the, it's great that the benefit fund is going to continue to get the $50,000 a year. And then I'm sure we'll be doing some work to get that going where it's supposed to go. I don't quite understand the $25,000 for the non-for-profit. Why? UC2B is the non-for-profit that is basically washing their hands of this at this particular point, or not? I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding this.
The not-for-profit board will continue to have a function of both minding this whole operation and then focusing on the community outreach.
So then the 25,000 is for other, like what? What would that look like? You said it says non-for-profit $25,000 per year through 2022 to the non-for-profit in support of other local projects. What is that? What is the other local project? If you give me an example of that.
I think that could equate to, we have an attorney, we have accountants, we have auditors, we have all kinds of people that we have to hire to do work. All the board members are volunteers, but, well, Charlie, you can probably speak to this a little more eloquently.
Well, that's part of it, but we also have, there's a research component to UC2B. We're involved with US Ignite, one of 15 test bed cities. So there's management of that and interaction with the U of I that's running the actual research part of this. So there's a whole administrative piece of getting involved in those research projects. So it's, but yes, we have an annual financial report, an audit, a bookkeeper, and an attorney to stay on to keep on the books to get this running. If we didn't get any money from them, we'd have to get all of it from the cities. You know, and if we are able to get more research dollars and so on, we will probably get a 10% administrative cut on those grants to again help defray the costs of running UC2B.
Okay, we have a motion by Ammons. Who seconded the motion?
Well, actually, no motion. There was no recommendation from the committee last week, so because we weren't exactly sure what we would be having. So actually, the motion would be we actually need a motion in favor of ordinance waiving the right of first refusal to purchase assets as provided by Jim Simon, our attorney, in our packet.
Okay, does someone want to make a motion?
I make the motion to approve an ordinance waiving the right of first refusal to purchase assets.
Second.
Okay,
And I have a question.
okay, go ahead.
Just so I understand what we're doing here, the MOU, we'll vote on this motion, which basically allows this thing to go forward, but the MOU that we have before us with a lot of the details in, that's basically a statement of our intent, and then eventually, is this what we're going to be held to, or will this be incorporated into an agreement with Countrywide eventually?
What Mr. Simon provided to you was, at that point, a draft. It has subsequently been signed between the not-for-profit and Countrywide, and that forms just what it says. It's a memorandum of agreement that outlines what the specific contract then will be enumerating.
So it will be reflected in the actual contract?
Yes.
And things could change a little bit in between, or
Well,
maybe?
it's my understanding new issues should not be introduced.
Okay.
This is the framework under which the contract will be created.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Yes, just to follow up to make sure. Oh, no, go ahead.
Just, okay, so what if we didn't approve this, and we don't approve the right of first refusal to purchase this assets? Not that we're going to go out and buy it, but we'll still wait the 90 days, and you guys can still do the RFP, right? I mean, what does this accomplish by waiving the right of first refusal?
The people loaning money to Countrywide, I believe, are reluctant to sign that last check until both cities have relinquished their right of first refusal under the old contract with ITV3. That right of first refusal, it's 4 sentences, and people who know more about the law than I do have suggested that a well-written right of first refusal might be 4 pages. And if the cities were to try and invoke their right of first refusal, we'd all be in court till the cows come home, and we'd need a lot more money than $25,000 a year just to pay for our attorney, and you'd probably have to hire 2 more. So everyone is trying to avoid any sort of litigation involved with this. But essentially, yes, that would hurt Countrywide in a way that they would find highly unkind.
It would turn the apple cart over right in the middle of the intersection.
Okay. Thanks.
And we believe they have bargained in very good faith. They have put up with a lot from us. We've put up with a lot from them. It's like any negotiation, but we've gotten to the point where we're all just very tired of looking at each other, and we think we have a reasonable agreement. And I think your attorney's been very hard on them. The City of Champaign attorney's been very hard, and we've extracted what we can extract in terms of an agreement. Now, we may be able to do better in this 90-day thing, and that'd be fine, but I think we've gone as far as we can go with Countrywide. And if we ended up with Countrywide as a provider, I don't think that would necessarily be a terrible thing. It's not, they haven't given us everything we want, but what negotiation do you ever get what you want? At least 100%.
Aaron?
So just trying to make sure I'm clear then, if we waive this right, that means that we do not have the ability to purchase for $8.2 million. We waive that right.
No,
That's what I'm trying to understand.
different right.
Okay.
There is this 4-sentence right of first refusal in the existing contract with the original ITV3 that in the event they're sold, the two cities have a right of first refusal to buy all their assets. And there's a 60-day window on that, and we've not been able to agree on when that 60-day window started and stopped. We've not been able to agree on what that amount of money should be. The fact that we at least have the $8.2 million on the table now is the first time we've had a reasonable chunk of money. But that's an offer from Countrywide. The right of first refusal would be with ITV3, and they've said they want considerably more than $8.2 million for their share of the assets in Champaign-Urbana.
I just want you to do is, I know you know this stuff through and through, and you think about it all the time, but as Denzel Washington said, can you explain it to me like I'm two, so I can make sure that I completely understand this? The right of first refusal just simply means that we will not buy ITV3?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
We will not buy the Champaign-Urbana-based assets of ITV3. ITV3 is bigger than just Champaign-Urbana. They have assets in Peoria and Bloomington and other places. And Countrywide is buying all of ITV3. There's not clarity on how much they're paying for all of ITV3, which is another source of consternation.
So they just want to make sure that we're not going to buy ITV3 out from under them or something within a 60-day period, or?
Exactly.
It is confusing, Aaron. So the original contract said with ITV3 that the cities could, in this window, nix whatever sale was going forward by buying everything. The cities, each city is being asked to relinquish that right so that the sale of ITV3 can proceed to Countrywide. Countrywide, once that gets to that point, and that's an if-then because it won't get to that point unless the cities relinquish that right of first refusal with ITV3, then Countrywide is turning around and saying, we will give 90 days to the community to see if you could
find a better
buy,
offer, basically.
right, and
Okay.
you then could buy the Champaign-Urbana assets for $8.2 million, and you can shop that.
Okay. That's clear. Thank you. Good job.
Okay, no more questions? We have a motion by Smythe, seconded by Marlin, to approve ordinance 2016-07-058. Would you like a roll call vote on that? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you. You have been suffering through many, many meetings, I know.
And thank you to all who have negotiated this.
Okay, next is reports of special committees. Any reports of special committees? Reports of officers? Anyone? Okay, Libby Tyler, Community Development Director.
I passed out a flyer on the Regional Neighborhood Networks conference coming up the end of September. That's co-hosted by the City of Urbana and the City of Champaign. And this will take place at the Hilton Garden Inn. We will have mobile workshops and a number of sessions focusing on Urbana neighborhoods. And I wanted to encourage people to register. It's an early bird rate, open now. There's a website noted here, very easy to register, and you'll get a sense of the different sessions that are available. This is something that would be very useful for appointed and elected officials who work with neighborhoods. And we're also interested in seeing if we can sponsor a small number of neighborhood representatives. That this is something that we can look at, seeing if we can be able to accomplish that. So looking particularly at neighborhoods with community development needs. And the registration with the early bird registration is just $100, but we would like to find a way to encourage people in the different neighborhoods and representing the different neighborhood groups in particular to participate. So I'm looking forward to hearing from council members on any ideas or suggestions on people who might be able to attend.
Okay, questions for
I
Charlie?
suspect Diane is going to ask the same question, but can we get that in a PDF form that we could share with our neighborhood associations, and then I know we can pass it around the different ones and see.
Yes, I will send you a PDF, also our boards and commissions too, so they know about it.
And the procedure for applying for this, is it a financial help or a waiver of the fee, or how will that work?
Well, we're looking for like kind of official designees. I haven't set up a procedure yet. I'm just looking to get some representation, and then I was going to hopefully work with the mayor and see what we can do to assist. So looking for a selective number of people. If there's overwhelming demand, then we might need to limit it somehow.
Yeah, because the $100 is a barrier to a lot of
Yes.
people that we work with, I know, so. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Libby. Okay, we have new business, ordinance number 2016-08-063, an ordinance approving a major variance allowing a reduction in the required west side yard setback from 10 feet to 7 feet at 708 West Green Street in the MOR Mixed Office Residential District. Do we have someone who's going to talk about that? Okay.
Just want to briefly state that the two ordinances that were placed at each of your desks were slight revisions of the ordinances. The changes to them were very, very minor, just a matter of a few changes recommended to us by the legal division, but otherwise the substance is entirely the same, literally like a scratch of a digit, a period, and a change of a reference in the zoning ordinance for one of the reasons, but we just passed those out for due diligence, but the content is almost entirely the same. So the following is a request for a major variance for a reduction in the required west side yard setback at 708 West Green Street from 10 feet to 7 feet. Did you want me to address the next ordinance as
Sure,
well?
might as well do both of them.
They're interrelated, but they're technically, because they're two separate properties, they're being regarded as two separate ordinances or variance applications. The other one is for a reduction in the required east side yard setback at 710 West Green Street from 10 feet to 7 feet. You might be familiar with these properties. They are two vacant properties that are that are proposed for redevelopment. They received a minor variance for a reduction in their front yard setback back in April. They went through a process of an application with the MOR Development Review Board, which was passed by the Development Review Board with the site plans that you see right now with several minor conditions. These were two properties that are affected by two constraints. One of them is legally non-conforming, being less wide than the minimum lot width for the MOR district, which is 60 feet. One of the lots is 53 feet. The other lot is affected by a storm sewer line, which runs below the eastern portion of the property, north, almost directly north to south, and it exists without an easement. It's a very old storm sewer. It's about 82 inches. It was put in place many decades before most of our regulations and rules in place for such utilities existed. The city's Public Works Department has a policy of requiring a 10-foot buffer from the center line of the storm sewer, 10-foot buffer in each direction from the center line to protect the sewer line from being damaged in the event of new construction. So in the process of the design for both of these proposed buildings, I should state that in the city zoning ordinance there is a provision that states that the maximum height is 25 feet. Any height there are heights allowed above that, but for every 10 feet, every additional 10 feet in height, there must be an equally corresponding 3 feet of additional setback in the side yard and rear yard. Both of these proposed buildings are 34.75 feet in height. That's 9.75 feet above that 25-foot threshold. Therefore, that would require an extra 3 feet to the rear yards of both properties and an extra 3 feet to the side yards of both properties. The rear yard requirement for both of these properties is more than met because of the strong setback between the north property boundary and the proposed buildings. For the side yards in the MOR district, the requirement is a cumulative total of 17 feet between both side yards and a minimum of 7 feet on both of those. So if one of them is the bare minimum of 7, the other one has to be at least 10. For both of these properties, the required side yard would have to be at least 10 feet on each side. Between when the minor variances were granted for the front yard setback and in the process of designing the buildings for their MOR Development Review Board, the applicant realized the need to request the variance for a reduction in the side yard setbacks of the spaces that are of the property boundary that is shared between both buildings. The request would be a reduction by 3 feet on each side. That would constitute a major variance because of that percentage decrease. On both sides of each proposed building, you'll see that on one side it is 10 feet and 6 inches. On another side, it is well over 20 feet. So on both of the properties facing the far east property boundary and the far west property boundary, they would be compliant with current code. The request is for a reduction only in the setback of the shared property boundary between both buildings. The MOR Development Review Board approval was passed with a condition of these two variances being granted. It was noted by the MOR Development Review Board that that a space of 14 feet shared between both buildings would have potential design advantages in creating a public space. It added a condition of some enhanced lighting, but that was noted by the board. I think it's worth mentioning that the board found that to be a design advantage as opposed to disadvantage. Also, the properties would have a condition of a shared access easement for the rear parking lot, an access easement for the center walkway. I'm sorry, the parking lots, which both share one driveway, an access easement to access that center pedestrian area in the center as well. Conditions which make the sale of the properties, of separate sale of the properties, highly unlikely, so that they would, in their long term, most likely be owned by the same property owner. That said, the variance criteria was found by the ZBA to be met in the sense that these properties have adverse conditions that were outside of the control of the property owner in the sense that one of them was legally non-conforming. The other had the storm sewer line that runs north to south below it without an easement, and it did not show up on any. It would not show up on any title search. It did not show up, and that the design is also not a nuisance to the surrounding neighborhood, and that it, because of the adverse circumstances, does not represent a special privilege to the property owner either. Staff concurs with the findings of the Zoning Board of Appeals. The recommendation from the Urbana ZBA, which was approved with six ayes, 0 nays, was to forward both ordinances with a recommendation of approval with conditions that the site is developed in general compliance with the attached site plan and with the application as approved by the city's MOR Development Review Board. Staff concurs with the recommendation, and with each variance, the council has the option of approving the variance with certain terms and conditions, or denying the variance. And if it's approved with conditions or denied, the council is encouraged to articulate the findings to support its decision. The applicant is also here as well to answer any questions if necessary. Did you have any questions for me about the applications?
Charlie.
I'm very happy with what has turned out here, and I'd like to thank Andrew Fell and the owner for accommodating the neighborhood and trying to blend in real well. I have no real issues with this, so I'm ready to move it forward if everybody else is.
Dennis.
Since we don't have a elevation plan of the building and all, could I ask a few questions about the...
I would be able to put that up on the screen right now if...
Yeah, do that. And I have a couple questions about some of the symbols that are alongside the building. So maybe you could help me with that. Okay, great. Could you go back then to the site plan, footprint plan? Okay. All right. So there'll be entrances from the front, and are there also entrances from the side? Is the space between the shrubs on the east and the west side, are those side entrances, or is that merely just a lawn?
There would be entrances on the side. I believe they'd be located behind the shrubs.
Could you show me where, using your little pointer, where the side entrances are in this building?
I believe they're located right here. I would want to double check the site plans to be certain again.
So you don't know?
I would have to...
The architect
is here.
Yeah,
but
well, maybe Andrew could come up and answer
Okay.
this. And so what we understand is that because there's such a large eastern unusable piece of property, you're asking that the buildings be a little bit tighter together, and that's the major side yard easement or waiver that you're looking for.
Correct.
Because to get them closer together than whatever was the given allows for the non-construction over the water sewer line.
Yes.
Okay, great. And then, so you've got front entrances, that's the main entrance to the
Yeah,
building?
there's only one entrance to each building, and they're both basically in these little notches in front.
Okay.
There's a porch that comes out, so there's one entry to each building.
Okay. What, and so there's a driveway then that goes on the east side of the building, which accesses all the parking to the rear of both buildings?
Yes.
And then is there a back door to the building
No.
as well?
No.
All right, does that, and then I just out of curiosity, does that meet like the fire requirements for exit?
Yes.
Okay. And then the little squares that are alongside
Along
the
this-
insets on...
These?
Yes.
Those are the air conditioning condensers.
Okay. Okay, I wasn't sure if those are patio squares, if those are raised box planters or what, but thank you, that's what I wanted to know. All right, thank you.
Any other questions while I'm here?
Yeah, okay, Bill and then Diane.
I was just curious if the ground floor units are ADA accessible.
Yes, that's required by the numerous codes and ordinances,
Okay,
yes.
thanks.
They're
Diane?
adaptable, they're not.
Diane?
Oh, I just wanted to say I attended that MOR review board. The plans look great. I think this will enhance the neighborhood, and I know everyone will appreciate the fact that you're not encroaching into the front yard and not using
Yeah,
it.
I kind of would like to point out that one of the reasons we're asking for this variance is that the minor variance we were granted was to reduce the front yard setback from the required 25 feet to only 20. And there was an obvious disconnect with the neighborhood about doing that. And even though we were granted that easement, we're not using it. So our buildings are actually set back farther than the 25-foot front yard setback. So the minor variance we were granted, we're not using at all in an effort to be better neighbors. And that, in some ways, forces the hand for this variance for the center.
Okay, we have a motion by Smythe. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Marlin. Okay,
I have a quick-
no,
just-
Charlie has a question.
Yeah,
Okay.
just out of curiosity, how many bedrooms did you end up on each floor?
The building at 710 West Green has 3 two-bedroom apartments and 3 one-bedroom apartments, and 708 has 3 two-bedrooms and 2 one-bedrooms.
Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you.
So we actually lost a unit basically. But
Okay, any other questions? We have a motion by Smythe, seconded by Marlin. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
And then
We have the next ordinance, ordinance number 2016-08-064, an ordinance approving a major variance for the second property, which is 710 West Green, so it's
So
the
moved.
same argument, right?
so moved.
Motion by Smythe. Seconded by Ammons. Any other discussion? Questions? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you for doing all your careful work on this. Okay, we have no further business, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.